Welcome to YogiViews, where my guest is yoga itself, through interviewing those who practice it, teach it, sell it, or simply love it. I am Antonio Saucis, your host. Throughout the history of yoga, it's gone through different adaptation processes, times where yoga had blended with other disciplines, influencing these disciplines, and at the same time being influenced by them. One of the great examples, perhaps, is what Krishnamacharya did in India at the Mysore Palace. After a very long retreat, where he reconnected with the wisdom and deep teachings of yoga, he returned to the palace to be the yoga teacher and discovered that wrestling was the sport of choice at the time. He then moved to adapting, modifying some of these postures to make them interesting and useful for wrestlers. Interestingly enough, these adaptations are some of the ones we practice today. Yoga is today practiced at gyms. And maybe this is one expression of this adaptation. And even though some people might think that the gym is not the appropriate environment to practice yoga, classes are packed. We have the pleasure of having here with us today Sherri Baptiste. Welcome, Sherri. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Antonio.
Sherri is a wonderful example of this mix. She is the daughter of Magana and Walt Baptiste, two who were pioneers, leaders, and visionaries in the field of human development. This family went on into incorporating dance, nutrition, spas, retreats, bodybuilding into a very well orchestrated wellness offering, and certainly a multidimensional one. But not only that, Sherri later on took yet one more creative step and came up with something called yoga with weights. And that's why we have her here today, to talk a little bit about this mix and to see and analyze how yoga had permeated this discipline, or this discipline had permeated yoga. So, Sherri, before we go right into the topic, I'd like you to maybe give us a little bit of a panorama of your upbringing, of your personal history.
Well, this is quite a vast and long story, Antonio, really dating back into my parents' world, Magana and Walt Baptiste in San Francisco. As you mentioned, visionaries, leaders, pioneers in the fields of health and fitness, and establishing the early yoga center in San Francisco in the 1950s.
The first studio, if I'm not wrong.
The very first studios. And this was in addition to having phenomenal fitness institutes and academies all around San Francisco in the heart of the city. They knew that there was something so unique that the great Eastern teaching spoke of, which was yoga. So they brought that to life. At one point they decided, in came the family, us children, 3 of us kids were born into the family, and the brilliance and sort of the light and the color and the tones of the vibrant studio environments that we were raised in were really very interesting. They had the yoga rooms, they had the gyms and the dance studios, and what I got to observe from a child early on were really countless, hundreds into thousands of people through the years climbing those steps, entering the doors of our centers and our studios. There was something quite unique and outstanding in the heart of San Francisco going on that these people were drawn to. So if you ask me about my childhood, people will say, Sherri, was it unusual? Well, it was in the real world. Our work, our family's work was dynamic, alive, and vibrant, but in a very practical way. As a child, I would observe my parents teaching, and again, these amazing people coming into the centers. They were the socialites of San Francisco. They were the educators. They were business people. They were householders. They were phenomenal authors and entrepreneurs. But there was something going on in the nature of the work and the people. They would leave looking more joyful than when they arrived. They were good-looking people, bottom line. I think we all want to look and feel our best. This was happening at the centers. So as a child, I got to observe these classes going on, people filtering in and out with the schedules of the centers going on. And my parents, in addition, would take them off on weekend retreats. We had beautiful property in Moss Beach, California, in Tamales Bay, a beautiful farm up there for years, and then into Central America where they bought retreat property, Hawaii, and up in Oregon as well.
Now, we know of a lot of kids that have grown in families that were in certain industries or field, and even in yoga, but not necessarily those kids follow the footsteps of their parents. But in your case, you did. So what is this? How did you feel this personal influence, or personally this influence? And also, I just want to mention that not only you were receiving social luminaries at the time, you were also receiving amazing yoga masters and teachers.
Phenomenal ones. These were the leaders, the great Sivanandas, Satchitanandas, Indra Devis, Meher Baba. In fact, the very first people to present Maharishi Mahesh were my parents in San Francisco. So again, it was many luminaries coming through, many teachers through the early years especially, really evolving, that my parents would open their studios to, open their heart to, and allow to sort of have a stage there to present their work. So it was quite phenomenal.
Yes.
And again, there was a level of attraction in the work. You were asking me about the, at what point did I decide to make this my own?
Yes, how you as a kid, yes, exactly, made it your own, because most kids maybe would renegade from, we've had enough from our parents, and yet you took it and took it on.
Well, I believe part of the beauty of that and what inspired me, there are several reasons, but one, my parents were wonderful about opening up the door of experience to everyone, including their children. We were raised, this was a lifestyle for us. It wasn't just going on a yoga mat and doing an hour of practice and leaving the room and nothing more than that. Every breath, every moment, the phenomenal people that were drawn into it. We had a sort of an extended family through all of it, and a dynamic, lively life living style of living through it all. So, and again, it wasn't imposed on us. It was our lifestyle. We had a level of education beyond just the academia that was going on through culture, through music, through dance, through enjoying the foods, the different cultures of the world in there. So at one point, and this is an interesting question, my brother and I have actually shared a conversation on this some years ago, that there was a conscious decision at one point in my life personally where I decided I wanted to make this my own lifestyle. Reasons being, I mean, there were different reasons. There were, early on, I just wanted to feel good, and I really did want to look my best and keep myself in good condition, good shape, good health. So I knew that I would have that in this, but there was something much deeper, that deeper essence of all of the experience of these teachings, this training, personal practice, that was like going to a smorgasbord, a beautiful buffet of food, but really quality, the most gourmet and delicious of foods and beverages and juices and this and that, juicy life stuff, versus something that was quite mediocre, another table filled. I chose what was a gourmet feast, which I found in all of these teachings, and again, the yoga that I've known, the health and fitness that I've known. This is a lifestyle.
This certainly is. Now, we've said before that your family incorporated different things, and because the topic of our show today is this adaptation that yoga had gone through, how would you say, if you were to give us some examples, or maybe your personal feelings about it, but how did your family adapt yoga to mix it with these other things, and how did this influence your personal mix today?
Yeah, well, an interesting question, and I think it boils down to potential and potentiality. So the centers and the studios, and again, they would have 2 or 3 or even 4 at a time in San Francisco. One was the Academy of Arts, where they taught poetry and dance, and amazing teachers would come in for the drama work and all of that. So they were helping people to cultivate different qualities. But again, when you really understand what yoga is, I mean, yoga is the oldest system of personal development. When we speak of mastery in the yoga realm, we're not talking about force or control, but this is about that power, that still presence, that internal power. So my mother's world was very much in movement, in dance. She was part of the cutting edge and the beat of San Francisco with all of her dance world. That was her yoga. To her, movement is yoga. We had gyms in our centers that were, again, when you walked into a Baptiste, Walt Baptiste, Magana Baptiste, a Baptiste environment, it was all breath-based. There was a level of consciousness no matter what we were doing. In our restaurants, chefing, the chefs, all the students running our health food stores, our juice bars, our restaurants, the boutiques, the centers, the retreat properties. Everybody was practicing, so it was a beautiful life force quality of practice going on in there. So it was conscious versus being unconscious in it. So again, the potential for the individual it was being nurtured in those centers. So adaptability, it was shape-shifting it to everybody walking into the doors where they were a beginner. They'd been practicing for decades. They were the master coming in from India. It was a personal evolution, a personal adaptation that was occurring with people.
And one that would certainly develop that potential in each person, because I think I remember some article I read one time about some studies or some opinions your father had in regards to how is it that a champion gets to be a champion, whereas the person that practices with this champion every day doing the same routine for the same amount of time, he's not a champion, whereas the champion is. So what makes a champion a champion? And one of his things was that you have to believe in yourself, believe in what you do and in who you are in order to get there.
Absolutely. And the power of the mind. And if you think of much of the Baptiste teachings of yoga are rooted and based in Raja Yoga, the royal yoga. And that when you think of the mind, the beauty, the quality, the gift of the mind, and directing the mind into the body, let's say you are practicing a yoga pose, it can be an empty practice if the mind is not present, if you're not directing where the mind goes. So let's say we take the mind, we're deeper than our mind, right? Our thoughts we're deeper, the mind is deeper than the thoughts. So you go in, you direct, as a director, your mind into a part of the body. Where the mind goes, the breath follows. Where the breath goes, the potential for improved circulation, vital life forces is enhanced. So there's a vibrational, energetic quality going through the body, and aliveness that comes through these teachings. That's the level of work that I was raised with.
Yes, well, and that I can certainly see that you now credit this teachings as maybe your personal success and your personal potential that you have developed so beautifully. Well, Sherri, and I think that we can bring up a very simple pragmatical experience that perhaps not everybody had realized before, that the breath accompanies the thoughts and the emotions. And so if you think, what is the breath that goes with anger? It's not a calm and relaxed breath. It's a short breath. It's an agitated breath. It's a high energy level breath. Now, for example, if you're relaxed and enjoying, your breath naturally tends to be nice and soft, and even with a sigh. So I think that is very interesting. Now, your father certainly used pranayama, and I wonder how much pranayama was important in his personal career as a bodybuilder, because he had an important career as that.
Absolutely. And in the West, there were very few masters of pranayama who really understood the energetic flow, what the energies did, and how to gently distribute them where needed. You mentioned about the differences in the breathing that we all experience from time to time. And it's a reactive mind. We were talking about the mind. The mind can be reactive versus response-able, that responsible aspect and dimension. So when we cultivate quality breathing, a breath that is deep and rhythmic is a normal breath, and we can feel ourselves sort of shifting a little bit. Something's happening, the challenge is rising in our lives. If we tune back into that breathing again, it cultivates a quality of inner leadership. So there's inner leadership, the art of that inner leadership, and mastery, which again my father applied very much into his life and into his work.
Was that easy as a daughter, or did that make things more demanding or for you?
Yeah, I love these questions. I get asked this a lot. People want to know, did it stir it all up for me? And again, I have to say that really, because I think the nature, the beautiful quality, they were so open. People will tell me in memory, friends I had growing up, I'd bring them home. I could really bring people home all the time. My parents were open to them, non-judgmental. They were really open to people coming in. So there was a warmth, there was a quality, again, that was healthy and vibrant. It was our lifestyle, so it was not forced on me, imposed on me. My dad didn't really, and mom, they didn't have such an agenda with me. They brought us children into their lives instead of honing into our lives and trying to force stuff on us and directing us through. So there wasn't, for me personally, I didn't have that big stirred up rebellious thing. But again, consciously at one point, I knew that it was my choice.
And your path.
A complete choice, yeah, and to take it. I mean, I think that each generation has a potential to take things to the next level, from the beautiful grace and beautiful process of all those giants that we get to stand on the shoulders of, like my parents, and with a beautiful view. We have, again, maybe we can be reactive in our lives or response-able and make a conscious decision, as I have done in my life, in my family, in my work, cultivating it from a place that really is actually way more empowered. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes, it certainly is. Now you're mentioning the way generations have taken previous knowledge and improved it or developed it even more. And your family is credited with having shaped the panorama of modern yoga in USA. So how do you see that, maybe not just now so much in relationship to your family, but yes, in relationship to yoga's history, and particularly yoga's history in USA, how do you see the influence of your family then?
Well, and then again, if you're speaking of my father, let's say Walt Baptiste and my mother Magana Baptiste, in our centers in San Francisco, through just the naturalness of them being who they were in their teachings with all of their classes, they were the examples. They walked their talk. They were the examples. My father had a beautiful practice, so he would his yoga and working out in the gym, all of these different things, they were really one. So again, the power of the mind coming into the practice, and the beautiful practices when you would see him in a yoga pose. And he was a master of those yoga poses. Again, they were not being forced. You would see the flexibility, you would see the strength, you would see the phenomenal beauty of his physique, as well as my mother as well.
She was very beautiful.
Absolutely gorgeous. They were movie star quality and beauty and stamina. And they walked through, I remember being a child and walking through San Francisco. Our centers would be around Union Square, if you know San Francisco. That's sort of the heart of a very dynamic part of the city. And growing up in the 60s and the 70s with them and walking through the streets everywhere we went. People would stop my father. He was also a Mr. America, and he utilized the physical culture. And when you really know the roots of that too, it's an interesting background to the physical culture realm. But it was about mastery, and it was about what we were talking about early on, talking about bringing the mind through the body into muscle control, but on a very dynamic, energetic dimension. So it wasn't just about turning red and making grunting sounds in a gym and forcing the body into something, applying it from the outside. the work, the family work, has always been a practice from the inside out.
Out. Mm-hmm.
And they were radiant. They
Yeah.
were radiant in the process.
And people like that.
Love
We all
that.
like that.
Yes.
We all like radiant beings that seem to have mastered precisely something that we want or we need.
And joy in the process, and
Yes.
feeling lighter when you practice, lifted, you know, uplifted by it all.
Yes, perhaps that's another quality of the masters. They make things look simple and always joyful.
Yes.
Then maybe you try to do it and it's not so easy
Not
for
so
you and it's so frustrating, but
Yes.
masters just do it in that simple and light way. Now, gym and yoga. Well, you can hear a lot of people saying that those two disciplines are not very compatible. And then maybe they would explain that yoga is internal, spiritual, it addresses the self, whereas bodybuilding or the kind of activities that you develop at a gym with weights and machines are more related to the external, to the physical body, and they're more image-based. But yet you have integrated these two right to the core, doing something called yoga with weights. So tell us more about the discipline, and also what would a person get from practicing it, and how is it still yoga?
And how is it still yoga? Well, a good example of how is it still
You want to
yoga
start there.
is just like our conversation here. What we're doing here, this is yoga. Preparing a meal is yoga. Driving our car in conversation, in the work that we do, raising our children in a relationship with that significant other. It's all yoga. So in incorporating, bringing in a little bit of weight to the body, it's yoga. Dancing, you know, your heart's desire, opening into that, that's yoga. Yoga is more than just striking a pose. The postures, the breathing techniques, they absolutely are powerful and empowering to sort of readjust, reclaim the internal workings of the body, to have a specific outcome from a certain technique and practice. When you work with the weights, again, from a consciousness approach, a conscious approach to it, it's all yoga. There's no difference walking into a threshold of a consciously based, a breath-based practice that happens to pick up weights, working on a bench, working on an incline, working with a leg press. When the consciousness is there, when the intention has a quality of the mindfulness, and even, you know, it's a practice, it's a spiritual practice. You're bringing that alive, and you're simply in your practice, and it happens to be a weight-bearing practice, a resistance practice.
So let me clear something up. So what you're saying is that because yoga is the integration between mind, body, and spirit, is the conscious awareness of who you are as a being and what you can do and how you can do it in life. If you keep that awareness and if you keep these three aspects of the self alive, then you're practicing yoga. This is what you're saying. So and that's how you integrate it in your
Exactly, exactly, Antonio. Great point. The way you reference that is exactly the right way. And even if you think about when we take a walk, right? We live in this beautiful Marin County, and I tend to take walks around the lakes here, the local lakes. That is a moving meditation. That is a yoga in action, a yoga in practice.
Yes.
So once again, when we add skillfully at the right time in the right place, a weight-bearing practice, it's yoga. Unless you have not had the benefit of understanding that just being in a gym, it can all be yoga. But it boils down to the internal training, and that what your level of understanding of what you're doing, no matter what you're doing at any given moment of your life is. So somebody can go into the same environment. As you were saying, it was like sitting with one of the masters, and they make it look so easy. But for some of us, we're always with the beginner's mind, because I'm you know, I'm born into all of this, but I am just such a babe in all of it. And I love that about it because it keeps me growing. My potential into my full livelihood of my life is unlimited because of that. But we're always learning, we're opening. It's an internal process of cultivating the internal conditions. That's what yoga and meditation is all about, working the inner conditions so that you can have those moments of satori and enlightenment and feeling so internally, externally as one and connected with the universe, the divine.
And some people might get that out of their daily jogging.
Absolutely, and why
to
not?
The right music and clearing the
Absolutely.
mind. So interesting. Now, what particularly, because we know what a person would gain when they go into a gym, but what would a person gain from practicing this technique that you've created?
Well, and the technique that I have created is actually yoga with weights, and it is based on the Baptiste family work from, again, my entire background and really observing and learning and being trained in the physical culture realm, which is the weight-bearing practices, and then the yogic, but the yogic perspective and all of the training and teachings of that. So I'm the author of a book called Yoga with Weights. It's one of the For Dummies brands of books. And it's a it's a real yoga book, 400 pages deep. And in there I add skillfully. There was a calling. I was actually invited by Willie Publishers to write this book for them because there was an interest in the fitness world to do something more addressing yoga with weights. But what I noticed was they didn't really understand what yoga was, even to begin with. It was being approached more from an aerobics mentality and training, and then stepping into a warrior's pose and adding a little bit of weight to it. So I said, all right, if there is an interest in combining the two, well, then let's really do it. And let's really do it in a way that is going to be empowering and healthful and safe for people. So I dove into this, and it was natural for me with my background. There was never a looking back and never a pause once I started writing this book. All the photo shoots for it, developing all of the exercises for it, all of the techniques in there. It made sense. It makes sense today with our culture too as well, with the great love of Western yoga, which again, yoga has grown in the West in phenomenal ways.
But mainly as a physical practice.
In a lot of it,
In a lot of ways.
And that's where my work is very much. You know, I'm a very popular yoga teacher. I teach 8 group classes a week here in Marin, and I work cumulatively in those 8 group classes a week with about 250 to 300 people in my weekly classes. I'm working, and then when I head out to teach at conferences and retreats, sometimes I will have hundreds of people in a session. And what I've noticed in there is a deep desire in our culture not to water it down. And yet I think sometimes the approach that they have only experienced has been a more just another form of exercise, as you so carefully and well mention here. But I know that there's a deeper dimension going on in a lot of the practices as well. You and I are advocates of that, and everywhere we go, we're carrying that with us. And training. I have teachers training programs, so I'm teaching teachers, and it's not being watered down in that realm.
Well, thank you, Sherri, then. Thank you very much. This was Sherri Baptiste, a very inspirational teacher born into a family of visionaries, and someone who had certainly continued with this endeavor throughout her life. Also a largely published author, and the book we referred to today was Yoga with Weights for Dummies, probably anywhere by now. In any bookstore you can find it. And I thank you very much for joining us. This is YogiViews. My name is Antonio Sausis, and I'll see you the next time.